Jeff Yoakum, president and founder of Marquee Search. Thanks for joining me today for another episode of Marquee Matchup. I'm thrilled to host a friend and a fantastic guy, Matt Farrell. Matt, thanks for your time. Welcome today.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. Looking forward to it. I appreciate it.
Well, you have a really interesting pedigree. So if you don't mind, I'm going to go through a quick intro and dive into some of that stuff. So we'll go through that real quick and then we can jump in. For the past 18 months, Matt served as the general manager of alternative golf and essentially the commissioner of World Long Drive. World Long Drive is a Golf Channel owned property. You've been additionally tasked with finding new future alternative golf concepts for TV and digital platforms to target younger audiences. So it's kind of hard to find more interesting job titles than the ones that you have now. The history to get to that point, you graduated from the University of Arkansas with a journalism degree. You were a student SID during some of that time. In the early 90s, you really started your ascension in the Olympic movement, research for NBC during the Barcelona Olympics, communications for USA Swimming, followed by a digital marketing role for the United States Olympic Committee when digital was the Wild West. So you switched gears during the dot-com boom and left Colorado Springs for LA to work in internet marketing for Warner Home Video. Not too long after, you returned to Colorado to be the associate director for entertainment properties for the USOC during a time when the last Olympic Games were last played on US soil. That was the 2002 Winter Games in Salt Lake City. And then finally, you spent 13 years with USA Swimming, most of which were as the chief marketing officer during a time of unprecedented success for that NGB, both in and out of the pool. So with that, let's dive in.
Oh, that's great.
So you spent 20 years in the Olympic movement. And as I think about that, was that something that was preordained? Was that planned? How did that happen?
If you asked the college age version of myself, I would have thought I'd been in collegiate athletics throughout that entire time, but really came down to an internship while I was in college in the Olympic world and got the bug, and it stuck, and just found a real passion point for it.
And that carried on. It opportunities presented themselves based on doing good work. Essentially, is that they built?
Yeah, I've actually, my career has been one of those, on very rare instances have I had to be the put your resume in a pile type approach to my career. It's been networking, it's been opportunistic, it's being in the right place at the right time for each move that, at least in my mind, has worked out well, and it's just grown and built. And so I wouldn't trade a minute of it.
So as I mentioned, you have some really interesting titles right now. What do you do? That's, when you see something like that, you always say, okay, now what's the work? What is the work?
So we'll go from easiest to hardest. The executive director of World Long Drive is exactly the way you described it. It's essentially a commissioner type role, while it's a 45-year-old sport, it's still very entrepreneurial and growing as an emerging sport, especially in the golf community. So that's pretty straightforward, of all the roles in terms of overseeing the operations to revenue management to policies to player relations, all the typical things you would expect. The thing that caught my eye about the role in general was this concept of alternative golf. And admittedly, I'm 18 months into this role. That is still whiteboard type material right now, but the long-term vision of it was focus on live sports that could air Monday through Wednesday, knowing that every golf tournament in the world is Thursday through Sunday, and be entrepreneurial about it. And Golf Channel, we're still getting there. That could mean esports, that could mean putting competitions, that could mean simulator competitions. So still very much in the idea phase. 99% of my time has been really trying to get the league in place in a growth mode for World Long Drive. But that's the long-term vision of it. of really how do you program Monday through Wednesday live sports.
How many World Long Drive events did you have last year? Were you scheduled to have this year? And what's the outlook in terms of the number of events typically?
Yeah, World Long Drive obviously hit like everybody else for 2020. In 2019, there were 6 televised events, 5 tour events, plus a world championship, almost 120 hours of programming on Golf Channel and NBC, distributed to 61 countries right now through Golf Channel's distribution network. 2020 was going to be a couple of events less on the tour side, but on track to be similar schedule, and with the long-term goal of getting it to 8 to 10 televised events a year. But I'll tell you, because that's going through a transition as well, through the impact of the global economy as well. And right now, Golf Channel's looking at that property differently and wants to find a strategic partner to run the day-to-day of it and just keep its focus on being the TV broadcaster and the media partner. So we're going through a bit of an evolution right now.
So that's interesting. Maybe I can touch on the what you found to be these differences, maybe the opportunities or challenges that have existed going from more, an NGB, USA Swimming, well-known. It's a different organization than coming into an emerging property within a bigger company. 18 months, again, you come in probably with some ideas about what it's going to look like. What have been those opportunities and the challenges? Tell us a little bit more about kind of the transition going from an NGB and into something more entrepreneurial.
Yeah, fortunately, I've been a part with USA Swimming and certainly the USOC prior, but with USA Swimming and Golf Channel, 2 of the best cultures that I've really ever been a part of professionally. It's been phenomenal for very different reasons. But a little bit of context with Golf Channel and World Long Drive, imagine the media partner being the league and under the same roof. And outside of maybe ESPN and the X Games and a few other properties, there aren't many like that. So you've got all these resources of NBC Sports and Golf Channel, whether it be video editing, communication staff, marketing staff, graphic design, legal. You've got all of these resources at your fingertips. But with that comes, I learned a new term. It's a matrix style organization, and that's tough to navigate at times. And so you have to really be a cheerleader for your property. When you don't always oversee, from a supervisory standpoint, people and trying to get them to help your property, which is niche within the 800-pound gorilla of traditional golf, that's hard. And then you forgive the very, very bad pun, but you have, leadership-wise, you have to put different clubs in your bag really to navigate that and get things done. And sometimes you have the benefits of being a part of a big company of NBC Universal, which rolls up to Comcast, and sometimes that they obviously look at the business a lot differently being a part of a big company. So gives and takes, but for the most part, a phenomenal setup and a great culture to be a part of.
Did it feel a little bit like you were the stealth bomber guy, that you were out there, doing things behind the scenes, like new ideas and things that you could roll out, but they had to be a little bit more fully cooked or not?
You did. You had to be thinking what's going on, and whiteboard. But one of the things that I've just been looking at on Instagram in particular over the last year is just golf trick shots are exploding. And you start to look at that, you start to look at golf esports, and you're like, okay, what can we do? What can we do in that space? But Long Drive as a brand is younger skewing, not irreverent, but the events are loud and there's big celebrations and the events are so much fun, which is a 180 from the golf clap culture. And so you'd go into the office and every now and then, every day or so, somebody knock on your door and almost like look around to see if somebody's listening and say, I just want you to know, Matt, I really love Long Drive. And I just, how can I help? And so we had this little bit of a cult following of long drive friendlies in the office that made it fun.
Well, as you said, it's about, building relationships and being able to sell ideas internally. That's when you go to a matrix organization, it is there's some learning curve there that you're talking about for sure.
Yeah, as a boss, sometimes when you supervise someone, you can say, just do this. And in a matrix organization, you're selling. You're selling every day just to try to get a share of someone's time when you have the next PGA Tour event coming up this week, the following week, the week after that, and you need to carve out some time from people to help your property. So good culture and good people, so that made it fun.
Well, if we can stay on the career tangent for a second, we were talking recently and you shared a bit of a sixth sense, it felt like, that you'd had in your career about when to shift gears to put you on ultimately the path that you followed. So maybe you can share some of that information about how you sensed, to shift and when to do it.
It's trying to look back and be objective. I would love to tell you how brilliant I was at the time. It probably wasn't the case, but there's like these three crystal clear moments in time that I look back at that changed everything. And fortunately for me, in a good way. And one was not being good enough to walk on and play baseball at the University of Arkansas that got me into sports information office. And the second is, you want to talk about somebody who's super clairvoyant. In the 90s, I thought this internet thing might have some legs to it. And, and I started teaching, I was a sports info guy, and I started teaching myself HTML, how to build websites, to get in when it was, as you said, truly wild. Nobody knew what they were doing. I built the U.S. Olympic Committee and USA Swimming's very first websites. If you saw those today, it would be embarrassing. From sports info to internet, and then I realized the trigger went off of I really need to get into the revenue side. And that's when the opportunity came up with USA Swimming. And I mean this in a good way. I morphed into a generalist type of career path of digital and marketing and comms and PR when things are great, and PR when times are really, really tough. And so you look back at those three moments that really defined, and I think my takeaway from each of those instances was just having a sense of when to make the career defining moves of what space I need to be in. Mm-hmm. And you can nitpick the details all day long of it, but big picture wise, I look back at those three movements and say, you know what, that was really the right thing. And it's just turned into a career that I've been passionate about and loved going to work every day.
Yeah, those are fascinating kind of things for me to hear about. So you said that you realized at some point that shift towards revenue. Felt like that happened, after some experience. What led to that? You don't have to get too specific, but I'm curious, when did that realization come? Was it because of how the organization was that you'd been working in were treating you? What was it that kind of led to that?
I would learn this phrase later from Chuck Wilgus at USA Swimming, but he had a saying is, you have a long-term opportunity in this organization if you can do two things: A, solve problems, or B, raise money. And just intuitively, you look around organizations and you see your problem solvers and you see your revenue generators, and they're in the mix about everything you do as an organization. And so some of it was intuitive. And sponsorship, especially in the Olympic world, that was the most immediate path to get into it from a sales perspective. Got it.
Interesting. I'm always curious how those epiphanies happen. Some people get in college, or their parents, or an instructor, or they hit the real world, and then they start to kind of recognize, oh, this is how it really is,
Yeah, and then the alternative, and I have the ultimate respect for collegiate sports and sports information. but there's a lot of sitting in an SID office on Sunday night waiting for scores and, matches to finish. And it's a little bit of a light bulb of, I think I see my career evolving a little bit differently.
Yeah, interesting. Good. So I don't think that many of us had any kind of a playbook for a global health crisis, a pandemic. But now that we've had a little bit of time, to experience this, how would you say that you and your organization, the leaders in the organization, have adapted and handled it? And so what are some of the key kind of learnings that you guys have brought out over the last couple of months?
It's a great question. And I go back to the same word because I'm a big believer in culture. And I think it starts with what your culture is in the first place. And fortunately, Golf Channel is a collegial, collaborative, everybody's there because they love what they're doing type atmosphere. And so I think Golf Channel weathered it better than some because there was already a defining thread to everything that we did. Mm-hmm. So the HR group with Golf Channel, NBC Sports, they've been great about online power hours and education and tips on working from home. And everybody made a concerted effort to pick up the phone or do Teams calls when emails used to be the thing. My email inbox is a fraction of what it used to be now because I think people are picking up the phone or Zoom calls or Teams calls. I think a positive byproduct of this whole thing is the video calls. I would not have been one that would have initiated that before all this. Now I found it more comfortable. I feel like I'm more engaged. I feel like I'm not messing around on my phone with a speaker phone sitting in the middle of the office. I hope that's a lasting byproduct of this. But it really just, there's no secret sauce other than there's just been a lot more personal touch to get through it.
Were you a work from home advocate before?
No.
You were in Colorado Springs, where you are now, and thinking about, some of your people were in Denver, some were in Colorado Springs, weather, all of those things. I'm always curious, this has challenged people, their conventional wisdom of, well, no, we can't, it doesn't work. Now they can't really say that because you have anecdotal evidence and this is what's been going on for 10 weeks.
Yeah, I think there will always be a part of me that appreciates the saying hello to someone in the hallway and seeing someone in the in the cafeteria and sitting down for 20 minutes. That will be tough to pry out of my hands. I love that and I live for it. But I do think my percentages has swayed pretty significantly of it can work. It will work. And especially when you get into the objective roles, revenue, events, operations, those type of things. The subjective ones, comms and PR and social, I still do prefer some of the more face-to-face and make sure we're striking the right tone. But I've taken a pretty big swing to being more of a work from home person, so to speak.
Well, we're in a competitive industry, both, on the field or, on the course and off. So how are you working in this? And it's a challenging environment. How are you keeping your edge personally?
Yeah, it's another good question because it's hard. I fortunately have always been in a role professionally that I love. I love what I'm doing and I believe in what I'm doing. And I characterize myself as a passion guy. I have a passion for what I do. So when that's the case, self-motivation is not that hard because I love what I do. But it's hard. I miss my standing desk, which is, sitting in an office. We're very disjointed because my wife is working, my oldest daughter's doing an internship. My youngest was finishing high school, and we're changing rooms to be on the computer versus on a call. It's like wearing an uncomfortable shirt at times. You're trying to figure it covers everything you need, but it's still uncomfortable. And so we're working through those type of things.
It's, with each week, you kind of feel like there are weeks you feel better about it. And I feel like you kind of step back and you get better, and it's 2 steps back, 1 step forward. It's interesting when you develop kind of a routine that you go, oh, I like this routine, or I don't like that routine, so I better kind of change that.
You and I were talking off camera a little bit. I've got a dear friend for 25 years. I played golf with him a few weeks ago, and it was just like, oh my God, there's a person. It was just like, it's so good to see you.
It's not a family member.
That's exactly right. I can't touch you, but it's so good to see you.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. When you think about the void that sports, or the lack of sports or live events, whatever you like doing, what it's leaving in our collective lives, for you, what do you miss the most?
Yeah, I would really say that the simple answer is you realize how much you miss the structure of the sports schedule. And we're creatures of habit by human nature. I'm not a wake up in the morning and devour the box score type sports fan, but I miss the structure of it, of where I work now. What does Thursday through Sunday mean? And how does, what come this fall, what does Saturday mean with, college sports? And, even though the NFL plays on a lot of days of the week now, you kind of just find a rhythm with structure. And I think that's the biggest thing missing. And it's certainly watching live events and those type of things. On the personal side, while I'm not an avid sports gambler, online sports gambling has started in Colorado, and now they've rolled out online sports gambling with no sports. And so it's kind of a tease, unless you're really into darts and Russian table tennis. So I think it all comes back to structure and finding a rhythm.
That's a really good point. I think you look at a calendar and you think you overlay a calendar with sports events, in April, the Masters, these things that you started to go, whoa, March Madness. And that's a really good way to put it. The structure, whether it's one sport or not, you had options, and you also, it provided a backdrop for our lives. So,
yeah, it really is true. Even my wife, who's an avid into sports, she loves to go to a Colorado Rockies game on Mother's Day. And, just in the grand scheme of things, that's not the biggest thing to take away, but you do a few hundred of those throughout the course of the year, and it adds up that you realize how much of your life was around it.
Yeah, that's a good point. What are you consuming, whether it's professionally or personally? What are you consuming? Talk about keeping your edge, whether that's a mental edge just to kind of get away, or, or to stay engaged. Like, are you watching stuff? You reading stuff?
Yeah, I mean, my go-to for almost anything, education, business news, self-help, is Twitter.
Your stock's down like 5% today.
Yeah.
You need to use it more, apparently.
So I'm always there. I started a yard project where I built a putting green and hitting area and net in my backyard. That's my getaway, my mindless, just move dirt. And that's my peaceful, happy place of just being outside and doing that. My Netflix go-to that the whole family has rallied around, and a little bit of a sleeper, is a series with Christina Applegate called Dead to Me. It's so dang funny that's been kind of our escape viewing as of late, but we're about to run through that one.
I've heard that. My wife has said that we're going to watch that next. So another vote for Dead to Me. Good.
It's dark, but very, very funny, and no spoilers. Look for neighbor Karen. She steals the whole series. So
Neighbor Karen. Okay, maybe is that where Karen comes from?
I think it was just happy coincidence. No,
Is it? Okay.
I mean,
Did you build that green when it was snowing out a bit, or did you have a break in the snow when you were outside doing your work? I know you get some pretty interesting weather through the.
being in Colorado, you adjust for A, weather, and B, Amazon deliveries. So it spread out over over 3 weeks, but it was just so much fun.
Oh, that's exciting. You're getting it done. That's great. If you weren't working in the sports industry, what do you think you might be doing?
That's a tough one. I always said consumer products. While I'm a huge consumer, just like anybody else, is a tougher world for me. I'm a cause marketing, cause related person, passion person. So I would probably have to replace sport with something that really made a difference, whether it be education, whether it be environment. If you dropped me in Cincinnati at Procter and Gamble and told me to sell more toothpaste, I would probably struggle with that a little bit, just personally, and how I'm driven. So I would gravitate to causes, and even doesn't always have to be nonprofit, but I'm drawn to that world.
Good. Interesting. So if we ended on a piece of advice, the best advice that you've gotten, whether it's the best advice you've gotten or the best advice you think you give as it relates to career, whether it could be a peer, or it could be for someone that's new and kind of coming up the ranks. I think that advice right now, people are soaking that up. And I'm always curious to hear kind of some of the best advice you feel like you've been either given or give to others.
Yeah, like most things, it goes down to a story for me. But my ultimate mentor professionally was Chuck Wilgus at USA Swimming, and he passed away in 2018, I believe. But I'll never forget this moment where we were sitting on a golf course. We were playing. The group ahead of us was slow, and everybody's still just looking at their phones. And a mutual friend of ours got a job in sports that, in our view, was 100% over this guy's head. Like, how do you get this job? And we're sitting there, Chuck and I are sitting in the car talking. I'm like, there's no way. How did this guy get this job? And he looked at me and he goes, Matt, you've got a great career. You worked at the USOC. You worked for USA Swimming. Never underestimate yourself on what you can achieve and what jobs people will consider you for. And it was almost a little bit of a, there's something in my eye type moment at the time, but it was so inspiring to me of, what, that job description might look intimidating, but I can do it. And it was just such a cool moment, personally and professionally.
Well, it's awesome that you can also reflect back on it, and it was that meaningful in the moment that you can probably use that as a bit of a divining rod as you're making career decisions.
Yeah, it was great advice. And probably the other attribute that Chuck taught me is, when someone disagreed with him, he actually became more engaged in the conversation. And it was just one of those, and not defensive, but he almost took on that's interesting. Tell me why you disagree with me. And it was just a collection of those moments with Chuck that I just always try to remember, and I always try to keep in perspective, versus getting guarded, versus getting defensive, and sometimes even questioning, can I do something? So it's always been a touch point for me.
Well, Matt, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate your time. You were gracious with your time, and good luck and everything going forward for you. Okay.
Oh, Jeff, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and always great to see you. Thank you.
All right. You take care.